Hi, everyone. Welcome back.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Dad's Planning Politics, your favorite podcast and now successful YouTube account. Because we started uploading all our videos to YouTube and they're actually doing quite well. So I would recommend checking that out as well. And if you're here listening from our YouTube account, please head on over to our Spotify and see the other medium in which we publish our podcasts. So very exciting. We're really getting across all the fields. You won't be able to ignore us even if you try. So we've got a lot to get into today. Dada, do you want to run through the
Oh,
different
sure.
topics
We're
we're
going to
going to do?
start with Mark Carney's visit to Donald Trump. Then we're going to talk about the Reform UK big wins in the local government elections in the UK. Then we're going to look at the conflict between Pakistan and India. And then, of course, as usual, we'll follow up with the upshot of the Australian election, the remarkable decisive win by the Albanese Labor government quite recently.
Yeah, great. Obviously, we've been talking a lot about that, but yeah, for now, let's just get into some other regions in the world. I'm going to talk about Carney again because we love Carney here at Dad's Planning Politics. And obviously, Carney had a visit with Trump in the White House, in the Oval Office. So a lot happened in that, a lot of really quotable moments, I would say. I think the first thing that Trump said to Carney when he walked into the room is that Trump himself was the greatest thing that ever happened to Carney, and he should be grateful. So it's interesting that he has enough self awareness to know he's the reason that Carney's in government. But does he understand that it's because people hate him so much? And therefore, the fact that he's acknowledging that, I don't know, is quite a statement to me. I don't know what you think about that,
I
but
think he totally understands it, but this is typical Donald Trump, right? He ignores such things and
mm,
just takes it from his perspective. And, and then he just says, we're going to be great friends, even though everything he's spoken about means that the whole of Canada hates the US. But Trump just ignores that, which is
yeah.
quite a skill, really, the way he does it.
I
But
don't
I
know
think
if it's a skill. I think it's just being ignorant and disrespectful. But that's
you've got to be
anyone
pretty
could do
organized.
that. They
No, but
just have enough
you got to be pretty organized in your mind to pull it off, right? I mean,
to
it's
pull
just
what off? Just pretending you don't know what shit they're saying
you
about
got to
you.
remember what stuff you don't know, what stuff you do know. It becomes rather confusing, I think,
I feel
anyway.
like I do that every day of my life. You obviously don't don't pay much attention to how you
Anyway,
interact
Mark
with people, but
Carney,
I do.
stepping back, if you think about the Zelensky visit to the White House, the famous visit where he was, abused and patronized by
Mm.
Vance and Trump. Of course, any new leader going into the White House worries about that a bit, but I think Carney gave a masterclass in how to deal with Trump because I loved his quote where he talked about, from a real estate point of view, Donald, some things aren't for sale. For example, where we're sitting in the White House here, Buckingham Palace, and Canada as well. And so that was in terminology that Trump could fully understand.
Mm.
And it was done in a really
In a
smart, in a
light-hearted, funny
light-hearted
way.
way. Yeah,
Yeah. Which doesn't
really great.
excuse Trump having a dramatic reaction. Like if Trump came back at that and got mad, it wouldn't make sense.
No,
The
exactly.
context is chill. It's having a chat. It's just a couple of mates having a
He
good time.
he out entertained Trump in a way. So it was
Mm.
really fascinating. Trump then said, "We'll never say never." And then I think Carney said, "Well, it will be never." Um,
I mean, obviously, very fair. And it's just interesting how the Oval Office has now turned into this media publicity space. I mean, it always was, right? But now the fact that every single meeting is televised to such an extent and like scrutinized every second of the conversation, it's really become what Trump wanted it to be. It's like the interview segment in a reality TV show where you cut to the side and then you see the two people telling you their true thoughts. Because
it
Trump
is,
just tells you whatever he's thinking, even if everyone's hearing it, he tells everyone.
and it
Um,
is, and the whole setup with all of his staff, a myriad of people in the
mm,
room with all this ridiculous glitzy stuff now in the Oval Office. It's like the
the gold hanging
palace
from
of
the ceiling and the
Henry the
walls.
Eighth or something.
Yeah, exactly. So outdated, so tacky, so
Yeah, yeah.
incredibly tacky. But
So,
so obviously that's been a very big thing in the continuing escapades of Donald Trump.
well done to Mark Carney, and he's giving a masterclass to the likes of Albo and others who will visit Trump of how to handle it, right?
Mm.
Don't be subservient, be funny, and be direct and firm and strong,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
see what happens. I think Trump responds to that.
Yeah, like don't get down on your knees. Like don't belittle him. Don't do any of that. Just talk to him like another guy, and that's what he really respects. I mean, it probably helps that Carney is a big businessman, and so he has respect for that. He doesn't have respect for other politicians.
That's true, actually. That's probably an interesting
Because
point.
he
And the fact,
respects money, right? And then Carney is like the physical manifestation of money.
and he respects winners, right? He's just won a big
Mm,
electoral mandate, which is
yeah.
why Albanese will be in the good books as well, because a big mandate. Trump respects that.
Yeah, I mean, well, just to touch on that quickly before we move on, because when we talk about the election later, we won't be talking about Trump. But I'm sure that everyone's seen the clip of Trump being asked, "Oh, so Albanese has now won the Australian election. What are your thoughts on that?" And Trump going, "Oh, yeah, he's a good guy. We have good chats. I like him very much. I don't even know the name of the person who was running against him." And the irony that Dutton is, what has been called Timu Trump, and that he has just been trying to replicate Trump from day one, and that's what his entire policy was based off, and that Trump doesn't even know who he is. It's like, that's gotta hurt, man. Like, when you base your personality off someone and they don't even respect you for that, kind of
I know.
cuts deep.
Very sad. Very
Yeah,
sad for Peter Dutton.
I'm very
Uh,
sad for him. But that's nice. Apparently, our two leaders have a good relationship. Then Albo's been really not toeing the line. So,
Absolutely. So, shall we move on to reform in the UK?
yeah,
Just as a little bit of background for listeners, those of you who are not up to date with this, Nigel Farage is the leader of Reform, which is really a right-wing party, right of the Conservatives, and they just had local government elections, and Reform did incredibly well. The Conservatives were fundamentally wiped out. Labor, there was a huge swing against Labor because Labor is perceived as not moving quickly enough and being too complicated in their strategy, etc., if I'm summarizing it. So all the fears now in the UK, if this sort of movement was replicated in a general election, Farage could well be the Prime Minister of the UK.
and a little background on Farage. If you don't know too much about UK politics, you may know far more than we do, but just in case you don't, so Farage is essentially responsible for Brexit. That was his main thing, and then his whole issue became when he actually got Brexit to happen and the referendum happened. They decided on it, etc., etc. He no longer had a policy to stand for because his sole policies seemed to be leaving the EU and Britain becoming an independent nation once again. And so once that happened, his nationalistic, very patriotic self declined to stay in politics any longer, left the UK to deal with the problem of Brexit, left, people such as Theresa May and David Cameron was still at the very beginning of it, right? To
Hmm.
deal with the problem. And he just fucked off with his family and went on holiday for a few years. And now he's decided it's time to get back into politics. He saw a gap. He saw that the Tories are hated right now, and he saw that the Labour Party is hated right now. So he came in, and they have swept up so many seats, and it's really quite a scary situation because I don't know what you would call them, the equivalent of the AFD. I mean, they're not that bad, but they're pretty right wing.
No,
They're
I
not.
wouldn't say they're as bad as the
I
AFD.
wouldn't say they're as bad at all, but I'm saying if you had an equivalent in the UK, that's what they would be.
Sure, and
And they do have
you
a
know
lot
he's
of
never
racist
he's
policies. I mean,
he's
that's what they're built off.
as usual, he and the Reform Party just say, Britain is broken. They don't offer any solutions to it apart from cutting immigration and these right-wing calls to action. So it's fascinating, and nobody's ever held him to account for causing Brexit and the issues of that. And the challenge in the UK is neither Labour nor the Conservatives are willing to say we should be closer with the EU and move beyond Brexit, which is the only way for the UK to get the economic growth they're aspiring to. They had really poor growth. Labor is trying to improve it. But fundamentally, the only way to improve that is to have a closer relationship with the EU. And whilst ever Labor and the Tories don't do that, Tories are the Conservatives, I think it leaves it open for Farage and Reform to come right down the middle of them.
Yeah, and the irony obviously is that they want nothing to do with the EU. But people are going to see the Tories and Labour not doing anything, just sitting around waiting for someone else to make the choices. And yeah, reform will just come in and sweep it away from them quite easily. And that is quite a terrifying situation, to be honest. I mean, it's just because I don't think they could run a government very well. They don't have the practical experience. They have no real policy. That, their one policy is to just make the UK great again. Make it great again.
Again, Farage is a really effective communicator in the school of Trump. He cuts through. He speaks simply. The average person can really relate to what he's saying. And this is a real message for Keir Starmer and the Labour Party and the Conservatives in the UK. I think, Carney and Albanese did a good job in their elections to speak clearly and get real points across that had an impact in the electorate.
I mean, I think that Carney did, but I would also say that Albo is just lucky that he was against Dutton, because I don't really think it was a vote for Albo as much as it was a vote against Dutton. Right, it was choosing the lesser of two evils. And we made a big statement that we didn't want that type of Trumpian politics in Australia. I think that people do like Dutton, but also there's a lot of sectors like in Australian society that don't like him very much. There's even big portions of Labor who don't think he's been progressive enough, and then the Liberals obviously hate him. Like massive amounts of the population have problems with
But
Albo.
he's captured the middle ground, which is why he's been incredibly successful. Anyway, we'll get on to Australia in a minute, but I mean, look at Tasmania and its example there. So yes, it'll be interesting to watch his space in the UK in regard to reform. And of course, the Conservatives have Kemi Badenoch as their leader, who's seen as rather ineffective at the moment, right? Not getting out there and representing what. And it seems like the Conservatives are scared because Reform would like to join the Conservatives and they'd sort of take them over. And this is really tragic because the Conservatives are one of the oldest democratic parties in the world, right? Successful political parties in the world. And look what they've come to.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's quite an interesting situation. I mean, it feels very similar to what's happened with the Liberal Party almost, as in the Tories haven't headed that far right yet, but the way that they've been demolished, and it's really turning the UK into potentially a five-party system, which is a massive change for a parliamentary system that is traditionally only for two parties, right?
Yeah.
To have five parties competing and getting similar shares of the national vote is remarkable, really.
It is.
Yeah, that's never happened before in English
So
history. So we'll see what happens there.
watch this space. Let's move on to India and Pakistan. For those of you who may not know, of course, India, the subcontinent, was a part of the Empire of Britain, and many, many years ago, more than 50 now, they separated that into Pakistan and India. Pakistan primarily Muslim, India primarily Hindu, but of course there's hundreds of millions of Hindus in Pakistan and vice versa. And so it's always been a very contentious border. Kashmir was the line of control. Part of Kashmir's in India, part of Kashmir's in Pakistan, and there's a part of Kashmir which was sort of in this neutral zone. And it's always been contentious. Both parties, both countries are nuclear powers, and they also border China. So this is a very critical part of the world. And quite recently, there was an attack in the Indian-controlled part of Kashmir by Pakistani terrorists, and something like 30 people were killed and such in that.
I think it was 15 people, and most of them were tourists, I believe, or at least it was in a very touristy area. So it felt like a statement to Indian controlled, Indian ministered Kashmir, I think it is. Because when you're targeting the tourism industry, not just the military sections of a country, you're really making a statement like you don't want people to be there. You don't think they deserve to be there.
It's been off limits for many, many years. I went there maybe 40 years ago and stuff, and you haven't been able to easily go there. So anyway, as a result of that, they're both super pissed off with each other. And just the day or so ago, India attacked part of Pakistan, some of these areas where they thought the terrorists had come from, and bombed sites with fighter jets.
Yeah.
And then Pakistan says they downed 3 Indian fighter jets with
And I know that
missiles, etc.
31 people died there, and I think around 51 people were injured. So obviously the toll is just getting higher. And I was looking at some experts just looking at the situation, how it will progress. Everyone seems to think it could escalate very quickly. So I think that foreign policy experts around the world, diplomats and the like, are starting to get very worried about the situation and doing everything they can to remedy it before it gets worse. So I think there's been a lot of statements being put out across the world, including Penny Wong, on the situation, and that we should really direct our attention to it. So direct your attention to it, I guess that's what we're saying.
The challenge is, Freddie, there's so many flashpoints in the world. If you think about Israel and
Mm.
Gaza, and if you think about the Ukraine and the Congo, as you often speak about, and then Pakistan and India, and without the US leadership, who is filling that void of trying to keep these things under control apart from the UN and various middle powers? It's a scary situation.
Yeah, obviously it's a scary situation. I mean, this stuff could have easily happened otherwise. But yeah, the presence of a major power kind of looking over your shoulder, being like, don't make the wrong move because I won't keep giving you aid anymore. Like, if you don't have hope, it's almost like a lot of what the US did, like US aid, for example, they did to benefit the US, but it did benefit people across the world, and it gave people hope that things could change and that things could be better. And then when you have someone like Trump in charge, it kills that hope. And then all these places across the world that like people are suffering and feeling pain and they want to get revenge on other groups, they start thinking, we don't have hope anymore. It's never going to get better. So why don't we just conflict? Why don't we just kill each other? And that's just a really depressing thing, right? So I think we can see that consistently across the world.
It's very true.
Yeah, maybe we move on from that topic and we'll go more into it next week when I'm sure a lot of stuff will have changed
Okay.
and we can give you some
All right,
real
so let's come back to
comments.
Australia and the upshot of the Australian elections.
Hmm.
Some seats are still being counted. Um, uh, Tim Wilson won back the seat of Goldstein from Zoe Daniels. So all credit to him. He was the member before then, and he lost it to Zoe Daniels, the Teal. And I hear he's been working for the last year to win that back, just won it back. But he's a Liberal moderate, and it's probably good for the Liberal Party to have someone of his ilk back in the party.
I mean, it's an interesting situation. I think we've seen a lot of Liberal members who have lost their seats and then given up on politics altogether. So it says something about him that he was persistent enough to come back and try again. You know, that his
Yeah,
ego wasn't hurt so easily, like a lot
yeah.
of other
No,
people's were.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then Bradfield, close to us, is still being counted. It looks
Hmm.
like the Liberal candidate, Capsirian, is in the lead versus the Teal. But again,
Yeah.
it's very, very close. I mean, it's a matter of 60 votes separating them last time I
Definitely.
looked.
And then I know that the Greens think that the seat of Melbourne is still up for debate, but basically every polling site and political expert has said that it has gone to the Labor candidate.
Yeah.
And that Adam Ban has lost his seat. But the Greens, I think, up until a few hours ago at least, was still defending the fact that he may still win the seat, even
Really?
though he's
That's
2,000
crazy.
votes behind. Yeah, because the idea of him losing, I guess, is so insane to them that they don't even want to consider it.
There you go.
But
Adam Bant and Peter Dutton can have lunch together and commiserate each
mm,
other.
sure, that would go great. Where would they even eat? It would have to be like
A
half
vegan
steak
restaurant.
restaurant, half vegan restaurant. They'd have to like meet in the middle somewhere. Bant could surely get like a falafel wrap, and Dutton could get some steak and fries, and they could sit on a bench together, something like that. How
Yeah.
lovely! They get along
So,
so
but it's
well.
interesting, isn't it, that the Green that he lost his seat, right? And
Mm.
so, what does that say about people's appetite for the Greens, right?
Well, no, but it is a really interesting thing. Like I mentioned in the last episode, The Greens did still secure 11.8% of the national vote. That's only like 0.05 or something less than they secured last election. And when you think of the massive decreases in votes, like for the Liberal Party, it's not like the Greens and the Nationals, etc. It's not like the Greens are losing votes like that. They're not. They're actually consistently keeping the same amount of votes. It's just that some electoral boundaries shifted, and it's more like this is an average vote across the entire country rather than having a majority vote in certain electorates. So they'll actually have their biggest Senate count in history, the Greens,
Right.
because obviously the Senate is based off how many votes you get, like nationally, and then proportionally you get given that many seats. So it does reflect the fact that even though they got 11% of the national vote, they only got one seat. It feels a bit of a disconnect there somehow. And I know that the one candidate who did get her seat, she resembles a teal in quite a lot of ways.
Oh, interesting.
She's a middle-aged white woman who, has lots of experience. And so she has either won her seat for the first time or retained her seat. So it's quite interesting to see what's happening there.
I do think it is interesting, and I think again, I think they swayed from the middle ground somewhat, and many people feel they're very radical in various topics, and so that could be something to do with the House of
Yeah, but
Representatives
I also think that
position.
a lot of the time, people who vote for Greens first preference, and then they probably vote for Labour. Those people, even if they would have voted for Greens, saw the fact that they didn't want Dutton to get in, right?
That's
They
true.
saw this horrific possibility that resembled what they saw in the United States, and they thought, oh, no way are we letting that happen. So I think it's entirely possible that traditional Greens voters would have voted Labour instead, because a lot of the time their votes are, then rechanneled and given to Labour
So in a way, what you're saying,
regardless.
Albo benefited from Trump, but Adam Bant might have been punished as a result of the Trump
Yeah, I think so
scenario.
because they're on that side, and
Hmm.
the Labour and the Greens often do work together in some sort of capacity. So I think if I was a Greens voter, I would have likely voted for Labour instead in order to make sure that Albo was the Prime Minister and
I
not
mean,
Dutton. So
look at Tasmania, all red, and Albo took the captain's call to support the salmon industry against many
the salmon.
environmentalists, against the Greens, etc.,
Yeah,
etc.,
that's shocking.
against a lot of Labor people, and electorally he was correct. He won all seats in Tasmania, and had he not done that, if Tanya Plibersek had had her way and he hadn't overruled her, they wouldn't have won all those seats in Tasmania.
Okay, but side note, because I don't think you know much about the salmon industry, but it's actually pretty horrific.
I know it's
Like,
pretty horrific. Yes, I've
okay,
read
I
about it.
know, but I just think that that's really important to mention. Like, it's really shocking. This is what I mean when I say that Labour has moved incredibly far to the right from what they used to be. Because how can they condone such a terrifying industry? I mean, if you have seen some of the videos that are coming out of these Tasmanian salmon farms, there's these deformed fish that are like they look like this. They have a massive crack in their backs and they're swimming all wonky and they have multiple eyes. You know, it's
I
kind of
don't think I want to
terrifying.
eat Tasmanian salmon. They've probably done huge damage to the attractiveness of people eating Tasmanian salmon. Probably their
Well,
sales are going to decline, right?
well, definitely. And I mean, this is the thing. This has been something um, in the general consciousness for a while now. The fact that this salmon is not quality and it's diseased, and fish farms are not generally good quality either. Fun little fact for people: they feed all of this salmon special food that dyes the flesh a salmon color because most of the time it would come out grey if they weren't doing that. So next
Oh.
time you're going to the shops and you're buying Tasmanian salmon, believe me or not, do some research for yourself on the internet. It's all grey and diseased. They're just dyeing it so you don't know the
Terrible. I'm going to buy
difference.
Atlantic salmon from now on.
Yes, please do, but like a lot of it isn't that safe. We're really getting a bit dire with our food sourcing now. But yeah, that's interesting. Obviously, that Labor picked that policy point, and I thought Tasmanians were a little bit
And
more organic
so
and environmentally focused than that. Never mind.
now the big questions is the Liberals will meet next week to appoint their new leader.
Yeah.
Uh, And so that's going to be very interesting. I hear it's a three-way race at the moment.
Hmm.
And so that will be interesting. My theory is this in terms of the Liberal Party. They should choose their deputy leader, a woman. They should implement quotas for
I
women
don't
in the
think they should
party.
choose a woman.
They they need to really think about all their policies, and I think they should separate from the Nationals for at least a period of time.
I think that the Liberal Party, who they are, if we're just talking, without any emotion in it, just hypothetical scenario, I think that their best chance of getting a vote is to definitely choose a man. No way. And for that man to then input gender quotas into the Liberal Party. Because too much too soon, these people are going to have a heart attack. Like, they have swung quite far right in this recent election, and obviously with the defeat of the moderates in the last election. So the idea of having that many women in high leadership positions, it's a bit too much.
But Susan Ley is a good candidate, and
Yeah, but they don't care if she's a good candidate or not.
yeah, but Angus Taylor is too close to Dutton. He was hopeless in terms of his financial strategy or policy strategy. He doesn't seem very smart.
I mean, I don't
Um,
disagree with you, but I don't think it's
so
unlikely that they would
therefore,
pick
Dan
him.
Tehan should be the candidate because he's
Mm,
the third, right? He's sort of middle of the road
yeah,
uh, scenario there. But the interesting thing is, even the Nationals are already talking about, hey, maybe they should separate and run Nationals candidates in urban seats against the Liberals, etc., going forward,
interesting.
right? So it's going to be really interesting to see how that whole thing comes to the fore. And the Nationals already saying they want to keep the nuclear policy, and others saying not. So you can imagine it's going to be a messy situation for Liberals
Yes.
going forward. But as someone would say, people wanting to go into politics who have their ideology aligned to the Liberal Party, it's probably a good time over the next few years because as things swing back, there might be some opportunities.
I suppose. You're strangely excited about this. I'm just gonna accept the fact that we have a Labour government, feel a bit relieved about that. Have a look at what the Labour government is doing wrong, continue to critique them in that way, and hope that the independents keep standing up for what they believe in and pretend like the Liberal Party is not a problem, because we have enough going on in the world that I don't need to worry about them
You
winning the
don't need to
next
worry about
election.
them for a while, at
No,
least, really.
let's take what win we can get. Take this win, be happy with our government, and talk about everything else. Because yeah, there really is a lot going on. And I think that's mostly everything. Unless you have
That's
anything
it for
else to add.
today. Thank you for listening. Remember to please follow us and tell your friends about us.
Mm-hmm.
Subscribe to us on YouTube.
Yeah.
And make sure you also put questions in the chat. We'd love to be able to answer some of your questions. We're looking at guest speakers we're going to invite on soon to follow on our Kylie Tink interview. And we'd also love to get to a point where we just do question sessions at one point. But we need to get some questions from all of you. So please do so on Spotify
We have
or
been getting
YouTube.
a few questions on YouTube, to be fair.
Okay,
I'll give
very
credit
good.
to those guys. So we
Good.
appreciate you. We see you. And basically, welcome to the family if you're watching this episode for the first time. And we're excited to see you next week.
Thanks all. Bye, Freddie.
Bye.